Welcome back after the lunch break. We hope you enjoyed your lunch, and if you're still crunching on that lunch next to your computer, be very careful not to get messy with all of your keyboards and things. Have had done that previously. The next speaker is going to show you live demos from ZoomCharts, drilling down the waterfall visual. Previously, throughout the bootcamp, we were exploring the ZoomChart signature drill downs on chart interactions. We were exploring donut, pie chart, with the nice notation of that the pie chart is something that everybody has been working with since they're about 10 years old. And now, once you're older, you can reimagine the whole things through touch integrations. Then combo visuals, but today the waterfall visual offers data-driven control over totals, subtotals, and column sequence. And this will be shown with a live demo from the technical sales engineer at ZoomCharts by Aivis Pavlovs. Ivy, welcome back to the Bootcamp Live, and nice to having you here.
Yep, thanks for having me. Hi everyone. So I guess I will share my screen in just a second. All right, it's live. So yeah, so what we're going to do today is going to go through the waterfall visual. We're going to follow the same principle as before. So I'm going to go through the initial setup. So what are the fields? What do they do? What do they represent? What are some of the main formatting options and some of the key features that you should know about when working with our waterfall visual? So on the basis of like the waterfall itself, it's relatively easy visual to use, right? To create the first initial instances of it, it's nothing too complicated. All you have to do, for example, I'm here adding one instance of the visual, just making it a bit easier to see. So, and as you can see here, we have 4 types of fields available in the fields list. So first of them is the category. So it's the same as for the combo visual or the drill down, or sorry, for the donut visual. So this allows you to define the categories and that drill down level hierarchy that you want to use. Afterwards, you have your change field. This is where you input your values. Then you have the total field. This is specifically meant to showcase some subtotal categories or subtotal values that you want to represent. And then, of course, we have something that we wanted to really have it in the waterfall, and that's the sequence field. So the sequence field just allows you to have specific location for each of the columns. So if we start off by using the waterfall visual, so what I'm going to do is add in a type. I'm going to add in a category, and then I'm adding one sequence. There we go. All right, and as you can see, it's relatively easy to understand as well, right? So we have our increases, we have our decreases. If you go to a different page, it can be styled in different options, but the main thing is always there. So you have your changes, they can be either positive or negative, and then you have your total at the end. Now, one thing that we wanted to do with the waterfall visual itself is to give you a little more flexibility when it comes to showcasing different totals within it. So for example, if I go into the formatting options, open up a setting right here, tab called column settings, I have a control called subtotal mode, and it has 4 different variations. So the default one would be, for example, showcasing just the total value. And then I have, of course, have the option to showcasing none of the total values. So I just want to focus on my changes so it can easily be done as well to just some of these formatting options. And the next 2 options that you see right here are last and all. Now, for these ones to be active, what I'm going to be using is also a sequence field. Because once I add this, you can see, I can actually see here some of, let's call them phantom columns, right? I don't have any fill color for them, but I can see that there is a designated location for some of the columns. And that's because if I go now to the formatting options, open up column settings, and say, for example, that I only want to see the last one, you can see that the visual dynamically calculates the total only for the last one. If I put it on all, the visual creates all these subtotals in between as well. And the great thing about this is that it's not necessarily provided by the data source itself. These values can be something that's being calculated on the fly with just from all the information available to the visual. Because if we open up the data view for this, you can see that I have a couple of columns that don't have any values. So for example, total revenue is one of them, gross margin, operating income, and these ones. And if I go back to the visual, you can see that these ones are, in that gray color, which means that they are subtotal columns. These values are calculated on the fly, and they're essentially just, creating some value in between different changes. Now, another thing that you can do, of course, for our visuals is the drill down experience. So for example, if I want to focus on revenue and actually see what the revenue consists of, I can just click on it. It drills down, it opens up the split for the series. So if I would have more categories here, the waterfall would just expand a little bit. But of course, you have that dynamic total at the very end. So you can do this both for positive and negative changes to kind of drill deeper and understand, what subcategories and what are their changes in specific. Now, once we went through that, and let's go back to this right here, and I'm going to focus on a little bit more on the sequence field. So sequence in waterfall visuals is really crucial because, for example, if I just eliminate it, even with the subtotals and everything, you can see that the chart has some particular sorting mechanism. And typically it's by either alphabetical order or based on value. So for example, increases at the beginning and then decreases at the very end of it. So what we allow you to do is essentially, let's just go to a data view, is add in, let's call them, simulated index columns or number columns, where you specifically define where each of the categories or subcategories are going to be located. So if I go back to the visual, all I need to do is, for example, drag in this sequence field. You can see it adds these subtotals, the ones I showed previously. But in the same manner, I can use a different sequence. And you can see this creates a completely different version of the chart. So this is one of these things that you can really start to play around and create, your unique kind of sorting mechanisms within the visual. And this also really helps you to specifically pinpoint the exact locations for each of the columns. Because, okay, not in every single case you're going to need this, but in those cases where order is really specific, this sequence field can just save your life and can just save a lot of time instead of using, different mechanisms trying to figure out how to alphabetically order them or things like that. Now, if we go to the formatting options, a couple of other things that we can do is we can, of course, enable the legends. So we can have, the total bucket, the positive changes, the negative. I'm just playing around with different names here. And one of the things that you can also do with a waterfall is by clicking on one of the legends, you can actually hide that series from the visual. So if somebody wants to focus on just the positive changes, you can easily just disable, these series in the legends and focus on the changes that are relevant for that perspective. In the same manner, if I just want to, if I wanted to eliminate the totals for that moment, I can easily do that through the legends as well. Because remember, that's one of those things that we like to bring to the actual users with our visuals. We want them to have that free ability to just play around with the visual, explore the data without any constraints, let's say like that. Okay, I'm going to enable this back. Now, afterwards, of course, you can customize the y-axis, so you can, adjust the font styles, the colors of them, different value decimals or these kind of things. Where does the zero line start? Because one thing we also offer is the ability to position the zero line. So for example, if you have it in regular, for example, column charts, the visible would mean it starts at the zero line. The center one is actually used right here. So you can see the zero is centered out right in the middle of it. And floating means that it aggregates it based on the value, like the minimum and maximum values that you do have. And instead of a zero at the bottom, you would have the minimum value there. So it just would allow you to, let's say, zoom in a little bit more on the detailed level of the value changes. Now, of course, we also offer to kind of transition between linear and logarithmic scales, these kind of things. You can also use the waterfall visual for percentages. Just make sure that when you're using percentages, as with other visuals as well, to change the value type for the y-axis. So for example, if in this case I'm using numeric, as soon as I change its percentage, you can see that these numbers have their own, mathematics in the background, so it just increases with that. So just make sure you play around with these settings and have the right values assigned to it. Now, of course, we can also use something like display units, value decimals. If in some cases it's really necessary, you can also use value affixes. And for value affixes, we allow you to add either a prefix or a suffix. So just as an example, let's say value prefix is A and value suffix is B. So you can kind of see where actually each of them positions. So this allows you to, for example, create these value axes with kilometers per hour or something like that. I'm just going to delete these quickly. Then, of course, you have your customization for the scaling of the y-axis. So increase the minimum step value. So for example, if you have some decimal numbers, you can force the visual to showcase only whole numbers on the value axis. Then, of course, you can also enable custom value ranges. If you just want to focus on something in specific, adjust the tick colors. So the ticks are these small things right here that help you to differentiate where the grid lines are going to start for the values. So if I want to make it something bigger, you can see changes right here, change the colors of them and these kind of things. And also, of course, you can disable the grid lines for the chart. So a lot of visual preferences that we just want you to give as a user to make sure, you know, that not only you, but your user is happy with the end result. So after the y-axis, I'm going to quickly close the setting tab right here and open up the x-axis. This doesn't have that many customization options, but we do also offer that possibility to kind of still adjust it to make sure that, you know, it's represented in your corporate colors or things like that to help you differentiate different columns in between them, and also to have that navigation. So for example, if I enable title itself, you can see that right now it showcases type since that is my main category. I can adjust the name for it also right here. So either write it right here or I change this column by renaming it. So let's say this one's going to be first level, just something like that. Is an everyday thing. So, and when I click on revenue, you can see that it dynamically changes and it showcases you the name for it. So that, I'm sorry, wrong button. So that kind of experience is also something that we do offer. Now, if we go back to the formatting options, x-axis we went through, we also have these thresholds. And for thresholds, one particular use case that we like to use and have it in the visuals is, for example, to showcase the closing value. So for example, it's really good, kind of easy to see in this example with sequence 1. So what you can quickly see here is that based on the last value that you have on your final total, there's a drawn line throughout the whole chart. So it helps you to easily understand, you know, what's the difference between the last total and the actual totals that were in between those. So that's one of them. Now, if we go back here, of course, we have some column settings. So paddings between clusters of values or the columns itself. Responsive font sizes, you can enable them through these settings we went right here. So the subtotal modes, so all, last, none, or these kind of things. Now the next one is going to be the fill color setting. So for the fill color setting, this is a visual effect, remember. By default, it's going to be on solid fill, so you're going to be using just regular colors. If you use a little bit of a gradient on top of it, this just allows you to make the chart stand out a little bit more in the report itself. You know, it looks a lot more visually appealing. It has something interesting about it. So afterwards, we have our toolbar, so you can make sure that you utilize every single button if you want to. If you don't want your users to have these buttons, you have the ability to quickly switch them off and just, hide everything that's unnecessary for them at that case. The tooltip settings, we can use our built-in tooltips, or you can use the Power BI built-in tooltips. It's really up to you on how you want to style the report again. And then, of course, what's kind of specific about this visual is that we also allow you to focus on these three kind of values that Waterfall has. So typically it has increasing values, decreasing values, and some sort of a total value. And for each of these, we have separate formatting tabs. So for example, if you open up positive change configurator, you can see that I can assign a specific name to it. I can enable or disable the value labels for it, assign the width percentages, line, the connecting lines, colors of them, the thicknesses of them, like the fill colors effect. So if I make it a little bit more transparent or something like that, the markers, the tooltips, a lot of furthermore customization to make the chart look exactly like you want to. And what's really great about this approach is that, because typically waterfalls, they usually represent things in three colors. So most typical colors would be green for increase, red for decrease, and then a total is, I would say, either a black or just some sort of column that makes sense in your composition. But you also have these cases where actually increasing values is something that you don't want to have. So with these formatting options, you can easily just switch, for example, that these increases that here that actually go positive, I'm going to have them in red, and the ones that are actually going downwards, so the negative values, I'm going to change to be in green color. So just this customization allows you, to make sure that the colors and the representation that you do have it in the chart is correlating to the message that you're trying to provide to your users. And of course, since we have this kind of a similar series-based approach right here, you of course have your own value labels for each of the series. I'm actually going to just transition it back to the default one. Here we go. Go with this one. Just a setting. Just a second. Negative changes. Let's turn it back to this right here. There you go. So what I'm going to do here is, for example, open up the positive change value labels, and I can say where they position. Are they on top of the columns? Are they inside the columns or whatever like that? So for example, I'm going to choose inside center. And then, of course, you can choose the label angle. So you can rotate them a little bit if you want to. You can keep them as just regular labels or something like that. You can put the background for them. So for example, what I can do is, let's say, make something like this, for example. Just make a darker background right here. The font color isn't great, so I'm going to make it a white. You can add also some shadow effects on top of it. You can define the value decimals for each of the values and also the units for them. So with this, what you really have is that, again, that flexibility to make sure that the message that you're trying to convey to your users and their user experience when using the chart is something that feels comfortable for them, because that's one of the main goals with data visualization as such, right? Reporting is one tool, so you're making sure that you're providing the right KPIs and everything. But when it comes to data visualization, your main job is to create a report that actually is easy to use for the end user, not only for you as a developer, because one thing you have to remember is when you are the developer, it's easy for you to find connections between visuals, right? Because you know the background of it, you know what data is connected to what data. But when it comes to the actual users, you kind of have to approach these cases through their eyes. You have to look at the report as if this is something you would see for the first time. So when I actually start to use it, does it feel intuitive? Do the numbers that are around it make sense? Are the KPIs that I'm using actually relevant to this visual and these kind of things? But enough about that. So yeah, positive total configuration, negative configuration. So you can go through these cases, make sure it showcases everything exactly like you wanted to have it there. And one of the most important things that I would say is don't be afraid to use the waterfall also with different other formatting options. Because one thing I'm actually going to do quickly here is I'm going to open up another report just really quickly. Just let's give it a second to load up. I'm going to show you also one case that how waterfall also could be used when you're using, for example, a date hierarchy and changing values. Whilst this loading up, so Davis usually mentions this during sessions as well. So these are live sessions, I'm right here. So if you do have any questions, don't hesitate. There's a Q&A section on the bottom right, on the right side of the stream. So just provide your questions and we're going to get back to you as soon as we can. If there is something that we don't cover during these sessions, don't worry about it. We'll get back to you afterwards. Okay. Why is it always when you have to showcase something, the technicalities just decide to go back on you? There we go. We got it live. All right, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to quickly add a waterfall visual. So let's give it a second to load up. Dun, 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 dun. There you go. So for example, this could be also one of those cases where you use just a regular date hierarchy in the category field, because this provides me that overview of years, quarters, months, and days. And then I can add just one value that's going to be changing throughout the period, and it's going to be my total sales. And this kind of helps me to understand what's the total between these 3 years and these kind of things. And if you want to focus on something in between, you don't have to kind of, use any external visuals or anything like that. You just simply click on a visual and go into a deeper level. So for example, let's go into Q4. December is more important for me. So this kind of approach is also something that I recommend you using, the actual drill down of the visual. And in other instances, don't be afraid to use also other visuals to filter out the data. So for example, I'm going to quickly add just a regular donut visual. I'm going to remove the selection. I accidentally clicked on it. So there we go. And for this one, I'm actually going to say, that I want to showcase my sales rep again by the same total sales. Let's do that again. And I'm also going to add a second level for this, and that's going to be my product line. So now the waterfall visual is showcasing me the total sales across the period. And if I use the donut visual, all I have to do is just simply click on one of the slices, and you can see that the actual waterfall adjusts correctly as well. So this is a quick way on how you, for example, can filter out the data without using any slicers or anything like that, because using on-chart interactions is what really allows you to just, make sure that the user gets more familiar with these reports. When you're using a lot of these slicers or something like that, one thing that I've seen common in reports is that users are getting used to the example of, choosing some values from the slicers. And then when you think as a developer, think like, yeah, but they can easily interact with the visuals as well. And that's something that they're missing, because as soon as they see a drop down, their mind just goes, okay, I have to select the value here. The visuals are there only to represent something, not to be interacted with or filter out something throughout the visuals itself. So, these kind of small things is what you can really pay attention to. And also, if you joined us earlier today, we had a session from Richard Garanch, and he mentioned to use dynamic titles with selected values. I just wanted to quickly showcase you an example on how it could be used, right? So the measures itself, Richard's also showed you these. These are really simple measures. So it's either showcasing me the selected value, or it's returning some sort of a predefined value. So in this case, you can see I'm using 3 visual cards right here, and I'm essentially returning all product lines, all regions, all countries. And that's because I haven't filtered out anything. But as soon as I choose, for example, classical cars, you can see that this is now being passed as a filter, and I can see a visual representation of these filters being applied. So, and it can be done also for, every single visual that you do have there. So that's just something that I wanted to point out as a really great tip that Richard's mentioned today, and especially for you report creators who are going to be focusing on, these reports that you're building for the competition. Don't be afraid to utilize the whole space that you do have. Use different visuals, use different metrics or mechanisms on how you can, enhance not only the performance, but like the visual experience for the actual end users. As far as the waterfall visual goes, for me, that would be it today. If you do have any questions, feel free to follow up. And also, one thing I wanted to quickly mention is that next week we're going to be focusing on time series, network, and graph visual. And next week we're also going to have a couple of sessions which are tended to be as consultation sessions for report developers. If you do have any questions, you can send them to us prior. That would give us the opportunity to create something beforehand. Or if you just want to wait for the session, you can of course join live and ask us to kind of help you or guide you through different processes then. But yeah, that would be it for the pre-waterfall visual.
All right, thank you, Aivis. We do have questions, and there could be time for a few more questions. So yes, use the aisle on the right from the screen. Ivy, thanks for the presentation. Waterfall is not a visual that you see very often. Even it has some very nice applications, but you don't see it frequently. Why do you think it's not that popular?
I would say it's not that popular because I would say 2 main things. One of them is there's this conception that waterfall visual is something that is only really specific for financial analysis. And that's something that's gone throughout different reports, different speakers talk about it. It is one of the use cases, but if you put your mind to it and kind of approach this creatively, the waterfall visual can actually be used in different scenarios. One of the use cases that we have actually used the waterfall for a customer when we were building it was he was looking at different sales results over time. So on the first level, he actually had the months for the reporting. So he was seeing how it compares to the previous month. And when he clicked on it, it actually drilled down to the sub level of a product. So it helps him to understand, okay, overall this month is a little bit lower than the previous one. But once we open up the segments for the products, this showcases a different picture. So he understands, okay, but what products have we started to sell more or less? And afterwards, you can already, start to go into deeper section of it. The second half of it would be the waterfall visual is something that still a lot of people haven't really explored itself. So, they quickly try it out. They see it has certain kind of formatting for it. So it has positive, negative changes. It has these total values. And they don't necessarily see a use case for it right away. And we all know, as soon as you don't see a use case right away, it means that it's going somewhere in the background, and I'm going to get back to it in a few months or probably never. So it kind of goes hand in hand here, right? If you haven't tried it out, if you haven't played around with many use cases, it's just something that you leave in your kind of mind, you keep it there, but you don't necessarily utilize it a lot.
Okay, but you mentioned that its best use case is in financial analysis, and all of the companies have a financial analysis department, larger ones departments, smaller ones just persons. So would you say that for these particular persons who are working in financial analysis, you should explore the waterfall visual more? And is that what you're saying?
I would say, that not only for that. Yeah, of course, for those people, it's really important because waterfalls give you a slightly different, better answer than just a regular combo visual. But on the other hand is that, when it comes to waterfall, you also have to remember that there are different metrics connected to this. So there are things called small multiples, which just allows you to split this information into more sub-detailed information. So let's say, for example, I'm comparing sales, like the changes for sales over a period of time, but you always want to try to compare it also with last year, with different product lines, what's the percentage increase and these kind of things. So because of the complexity that typically is the use case for the waterfall, I think that it's just one of the reasons why it's not being utilized that much. If you look at some of the examples that are available there, it kind of ranges from really simple ones to really complex ones. It's almost like there's nothing in between there.
Okay. Well, we're running out of time and we don't have any more questions, and we still have to do a revamp for the rest of the day. Thank you very much, Aivis. And yes, as you mentioned, once you're starting to prepare the reports, Aivis on Monday will be available for a Q&A session. So just if you have anything, Aivis and all this two Power BI masters will help you. So if you don't have any questions right now, you can ask them on Monday at the live Q&A session. Thank you, Aivis.
Yep. Have a great day, everyone.